Hello everyone, doing something different today. I thought I would be folding all this freshly cleaned laundry while I talk about my day so I can hit two birds with one stone. So let's get started. Okay, and I'm going to take these earbuds out because I gotta be honest, when I have them in my ears too long, they kind of start to irritate my ear skin. Okay, so how's everybody doing? I'm doing pretty alright myself. I'm gonna go through the day from beginning to end. So, let me think. How did it play out? Was it a good day? Yeah, I'd say it was a good day. As long as there's no pain or suffering, it's always a good day. So, from what I remember, I was woken up by a phone call by my mom at around like 9:30 a.m. in the morning. Uh, we were discussing doing some home improvement around the backyard, including putting like some new material on top of the patio roof and things like that. So yeah, that was a pretty good convo. She was in need of some a some advice, so we were like discussing advice with Google's Gemini, and then I copy and pasted the advice from Gemini to an email. So yeah, all that is working out pretty well, I would say. Things are developing, and it's exciting. Well, anyways, after that call, I continued to doze off onto sleep till eventually I decided to get up at around 9:50, where I decided to go off to the kitchen and find something to eat. I was getting pretty peckish, so I thought, what sounds good right now? Oh, I know. How about a muffin, and specifically a cinnamon crunch muffin? So I got one from the kitchen. It's already pre-made, and I chopped it in 4 slices and put some butter on it. I put some butter in the microwave, warmed that up for a good while before eventually dolloping that on the muffin. And I ate that with a cup of coffee I also brewed. And I decided to watch a new video by that actually was a continuation of a video I was watching yesterday by Jesse Michaels and James Ramsey about a couple that was going off to Las Vegas, Nevada, and they came across a a round craft that they tried to capture footage of before eventually deciding to inspect some rocks, and then they saw a triangular craft, but they were so taken aback by its presence that they didn't think to take a camera and film it, and then zoomed off before they could even have that thought anyways. But there was a little bit of footage of the round craft that was filmed. And they showed that at the It's Probably Nothing conference event held by Jesse Michaels and James Ramsey, where they put it on the TV in the back, and they had like an analysis, like zoom in on the footage. And yeah, it did appear that there was a round craft, and what made it believable and not something that looked like I was expecting an AI generated image, if I was being honest with you, or AI generated video. But what made it believable to me of it not being AI generated was the fact that it just was like, vertical phone footage that was kind of like shaking and like just, well, pointing in a haphazard direction that was didn't feel like fully directional, and the craft itself was just far off into the distance. And it's one of those things where unless you're really paying attention, it's a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. Um, I mean, it wasn't a super clear video, let's be honest, but at the very least felt believable in terms of not feeling like, oh, they're pulling our leg with AI generated nonsense. So that's cool. Um, the actual footage itself didn't really give us a good, clear view of this thing, so that was kind of disappointing. And then after that, they introduced UAP GERB, one of the most knowledgeable of government UAP retrieval programs. He has a YouTube channel called UAP GERB. That's GERB, UAP GERB, where he basically, talks about legacy UAP retrieval programs, and he attempts to break down the different like companies that may be involved, like Northrop Grumman and like so many other companies like Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, stuff like that. His videos, I'll say this, I mean, I love the fact that there's someone out there who's going through all the trouble of attempting top secret government, technology, but at the same time, like, wow, like, you really have to be paying attention. But anyways, got carried off there. Yeah, they basically just talked with Gerb, asked him a lot of questions about the phenomenon, got some answers. Then eventually he left after they had a little game with him that allowed them to introduce a new guest, which was like a former like UFC fighter who became interested in the UAP subject. And they basically just had a really long conversation about like things like synchronicities and understanding human consciousness and potential like civilizations that were probably far more advanced than we ever knew, but their advancements were taken away either due to a natural disaster or man-made disaster. Yeah, it was really, really interesting stuff. And as I was listening to all of this, after I was done eating my muffin and coffee, I decided to then go to the den and play some of this game called Teardown on my PlayStation 5. This is a really fun game. It's kind of hard if you don't really understand how it works, because like it's basically you are someone who's involved in heists, and you have to find ways of taking like these assignments where you have to take like expensive cars or things, and it's all done in this really blocky art style, but it's like lit in a way that makes it look really realistic. And yeah, this is basically like a puzzle game on top of a destruction game. It uses the destruction and the puzzling both hand in hand, and it creates a really unique experience I haven't really experienced before in any other game. It's pretty awesome. I'd recommend getting Teardown if you're into destruction games and puzzle games for sure. It really forces you to use your noggin and your reflexes to beat challenges in a timely manner, especially like when you take an item and then you're like set the alarms and like, ooh, the enforcement's coming, so you've got to like get into your like vehicle with the supplies you have and get on out of there. So yeah, pretty good game, I would say. But anyways, after I was done playing that, I had a really long conversation with my sister about like media preservation that ended up spiraling into different subjects like, EMP attacks from like China, and media not being truly preservation, preservable because of potential attacks like EMP attacks and things like. Speaking of EMP attacks, apparently my phone stopped recording in the midst of me talking, and I didn't realize until my phone switched to the YouTube app and turned off the flashlight, which I'm using for lighting right now. So now I've got to remember what I said after that cut out. Okay, so basically, yeah, we had a long conversation. It went from what we just talked about to underground bases and the Younger Dryas and older civilizations having much more advanced technology than we give them credit for, and how humanity's been able to advance so far in such a short period of time. Currently, that who's to say that when in the time that humanity exists on planet Earth, they haven't had a similar spike in advancements at a previous point in human history. So yeah, it was a pretty compelling conversation. Then we split our ways. My sister went to do her own thing. I did my thing, where I reheated some Chinese food, and I ended up eating that while I with a soda, Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar, and I decided to watch this new video from Red Letter Media called "What Are Movies," and it was basically like a new Into the Black Void episode, which is their episode series where they basically just talk about like the decline of certain things like entertainment, franchises, stuff like that. And ultimately, they basically said that the whole idea of a traditional movie is seemingly becoming a thing of the past, where a theater, you'd gather groups of people, they'd come over, and they'd watch it all and like enjoy it because of how well it was put together and all. But nowadays, it feels like movies are becoming second class citizens, because they made their point by showing a lot of different movies that were released within the span of this year that no one has heard of, that had big budgets, that had known actors in them. And despite all of that going for them, it's as if those films don't even exist. It's honestly insane, because, you would think, oh, we gotta advertise this, we gotta let people know about it. But it seems like advertising for films isn't really like being made as much a priority as I think these companies really should make them. Like, I feel like, at least do a guerrilla campaign on like TikTok or whatever for a movie, like just leaving it up to the viewer to figure out on their own, or even just a movie fan who looks into this stuff, who doesn't even know if a film even exists or is out yet, unless like they explicitly look for it. Like, for example, there was a film that I was actually interested in watching called Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, directed by Gore Verbinski, the guy behind Rango, one of my favorite films, as well as the Pirates of the Caribbean films, I think the first three. And he made this new movie. I saw the trailer for it. It looked actually pretty interesting. It was a guy who time traveled back in time to let everyone know that essentially AI and VR has essentially destroyed humanity, and he wants to create a ragtag group of people to stop society from falling apart again. And I thought, oh, this looks like a fun and interesting, concept. And then after that, nothing. Like, there was no advertisement. I mean, I don't have ads on YouTube, but we do have ads on things like Tubi. Oh, that's something I notice on ads for like Tubi or like Amazon or whatever. There's only ads for like drugs. Like, literally every single ad's a drug, or it's like for like a washing machine, soap or whatever. There's never any ads for movies. You would think that, that these companies, to get the word out for a film that maybe they want people to know exists or is in theaters now, they would have it being advertised on these streaming networks for the, pay for the ad option, which a lot of people do because it's cheaper than the ad-free option. But for whatever reason, they don't do that. And because they don't do that, people aren't aware these films exist. And because they're not aware they don't exist, they end up bombing in the box office. So it honestly, it's like, are they trying to kill traditional movie theaters as a business because they don't think people want to get off their bahunkuses and drive to a theater to see a specific film? Um, I mean, clearly there's going to always be those tentpole films that people will go out of their way to see in a theater. Stuff like, Spider-Man: A New Day and the Super Mario Galaxy movie, films like that that are clearly already going to have a huge audience because they're a recognized IP. But for things that are like, new or daring or interesting ideas, it's pretty much just going to be relegated to like streaming. It's, because releasing that in thousands of screens is too risky. It only makes sense to release something in thousands of screens if it's based off something people already recognize, or is like animated, or is a horror movie. If it's not those three things, I mean, then again, being animated, there was that Wonder Dog movie that came out that no one heard about that ended up bombing. But maybe you need a distinct animation visual language to really get people excited. Just look at K-pop Demon Hunters. That movie got a huge audience, and there was barely any advertising for that, and it was probably because it had a cool visual style on top of really good music. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just attribute the failure to movies to just be like, ooh, people aren't hip with the times. It's not hip with the times anymore. Like, people don't care because, like, their attention spans are destroyed, and maybe they don't care because there's not much good stuff that's coming out anyways, because maybe it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, the people who make it don't care enough to put out good quality work, and then when they put it out, they don't care enough to advertise it, which means people don't care enough to watch because they don't care enough to care about because they don't know it doesn't exist, which creates a negative feedback loop, which ultimately leads to it not doing well, which ultimately leads to the theater losing a lot of money, which ultimately leads to the death of movie theaters. So basically, what I'm saying is that the reason why stuff like theaters might be in a, free fall could just be the fact that a lot of the modern stuff that's getting funded now is simply just not that interesting, or it's not interesting enough for investors to feel like they need to advertise it to people like in a massive way. So they just decide to cut their losses, release and maybe do a tax write-off or something. I don't know. It's a really dire situation, that's for sure, for the entertainment industry, for movies. Feels like we're really in the last days of that, and that's honestly depressing because when I was a kid, I always was like, oh my gosh, making movies would be the coolest job in the world. And the world that I grew up in is pretty much, it no longer exists. I feel like the world I grew up in was really the last bastion of that world that to grow up in, because that was before stuff like AI and like, unreasonable demands on workers for the same amount of pay, and just the oncoming generation having their attention spans decimated. I genuinely believe that my generation was really the last one to enjoy every other previous generation up until that point. It's like way of life. And by that I mean, like, you go to college, you get your degree, you get a sustainable career. You don't have to worry about a volatile environment where you could be replaced at any second because of corporate greed. You made enough money to have a sustainable life for you and your family. Like, I feel like that era is kind of just going kaput due to these rising prices, rising inflation. It's really sad, like the world that I was promised, that my sisters were promised, that my mom was promised, doesn't exist anymore. All because attention spans are destroyed. Um, People are becoming apathetic about like putting new stuff out there because they're like, why bother which ultimately is creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're just, it seems like we're just, our own destruction is being made up by ourselves because of, a lack of caring and just a nihilist view of how we're going to be taken out by AI and we should just give up. All I'm saying is it's a pretty bad time to be alive right now if, you want to feel like, there's any hope for any future human civilization. I hate to be negative. I don't like being negative. In fact, I like being positive over negative. But, maybe it's because I watched that M. Lemon video from his Downward Diary YouTube channel and just made me think, oh gosh, things really might be going downhill, this is bad. And then that other YouTube channel where the guy was talking about Gen Alphas, basically their brains are cooked because they consume too much brain rot and stuff. And we might be headed towards a real life idiocracy in the next 23 years when Gen Alpha grows up and they don't even know how to read. Yeah, apparently we have like a really big issue with illiteracy right now. And yeah, it's things are looking dire is what I'm saying. Yeah, things are looking real dire. Oh well, at least I was able to experience life before all this nonsense chaos started. So that's cool, I guess. I got to have a real childhood instead of being glued onto a screen 24/7 because my parents were too exhausted from being overworked and underpaid to tend to my social and emotional needs. Yeah. Oh gosh. We're doomed. Okay. No, we're not doomed. We're only as doomed as we say we are. Again, I just did the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing. I said maybe the reason why theaters are getting destroyed is because of self-fulfilling prophecy, and then I say all that stuff, and then I feed into the whole negativity loop, which means that I'm feeding into the negativity beast and fulfilling that prophecy by talking about it, when in reality I should talk about positive things like, hey, at least humanity's still going, and at least we're, we still have the ability to fight back. And if we ever have if kids of my own, I definitely would not have them have their brains rotted on iPads. I'd have them experience the real world, and I definitely would. I need to have better discipline when it comes to how much screen time I have, and be just overall more mature with how I spend my time, because currently I'm having difficulties with that right now. But anywho, I got off on a tangent, didn't I? All because of the Red Letter Media video. Let's move on to the daily update, continue that. My sister found our orange cat, Malcolm, who was, she took, and he was super cute. She gave him to me, and I pet him and was watching the video continuously while petting him, until eventually I let Malcolm go outside. And then after that, I decided to go ahead and start getting ready for work. So I put on my work clothes, I combed my hair, I got everything I needed, I said goodbye to my sister, that I love her, and then I left it around 2:55 p.m. And I eventually arrived at work, and when I got to work, I checked my schedule. I said hello to my coworkers. I accidentally called one of my coworkers the wrong name after saying the name of a previous coworker, and when I said hello to the other coworker, I called them the name of the previous one. So total brain fried moment there. Yeah, but anywho, the schedule sweeps again. Not surprising. I mean, since that's pretty much been my schedule for the past I'd say like probably 3-4 weeks now, right? Just sweeps, and so you know the drill. Sweep produce, sweep the break room, Then I was called in to read some documentation signed before eventually um, sweeping the floors and oh yeah, I forgot to mention I did do some breath work before leaving for work, so there's that in case you're curious about that. Um, and yeah, what else can I really? Um, yeah, so first half of the day just did a whole lot of sweeping and checking the restrooms and all, and then eventually I had my first break where I once again did some breath work. I think it was called the Jim Hoffa technique. That was pretty nice. I liked the way that made me feel. I felt really relaxed and calm after doing that. And then, yeah, I just continued sweeping and helping customers find things they needed, taking orders out, and whatnot. Until eventually I punched out for lunch, where I went home. I made a sandwich using potato bread, mustard, mayonnaise, and what else? Oh yeah, pepper jack cheese, which was really good. And then eventually, I left back for work. I mean, oh yeah. Also with the sandwich, I had Dr Pepper Zero sugar, and yeah, I drank that. Yeah, and then I left. Oh yeah, I had a muffin and coffee before leaving too. Until eventually I arrived back at work, where the last 4 hours I was really grateful for one of my coworkers because they actually helped me by wiping most of the check stands down for me, which I was really grateful for. Um, and yeah, I took out the trash. I brought bags in. I put them in their check stand designated locations. And what else? I brought 16 carts and the signs in. I closed the produce blinds. I swept the floors. I punched all my sweeps in. And yeah, and then I said goodnight to my boss. I drove home. When I arrived home, I greeted my mom. I said goodnight to her. I watched a video about this guy who was a forensic expert who was reviewing the Epstein files. He was talking about the connections between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And what they allowed to be viewed was pretty much like mostly redacted stuff, was stuff that, where Epstein seemingly was negative against Trump. But once again, there was a lot of redacted images where it's just black squares throughout. So, with all that, definitely makes you raise eyebrows, that's for sure. Like, what are they really hiding, Release all of the files, not just some of the files. And I mean, unless it's like compromises some people's safety and personal information security, but for like the creeps who did atrocities, and don't let them get away with it. Like, actually have have some justice. And then I told my sister what I was watching. She was interested. We watched it together. And yeah, then after that, I decided to watch an entire video called The Trump Roast, because I was like, what the heck is this? I've never heard of this before. And it was really surreal. It was a bunch of like celebrities who were like being paid to roast and then congratulate Trump. It was really weird. It was like done back in 2011. Something about it though, it did make me feel nostalgic, and I think it was like the warm lighting of like late 2000s, early 2010s, like TV. Something about it just had a more warm and nice look and feel to it. I feel like a lot of like, I don't really watch any TV now. I think most TV these days is just the news, any shows that get made are like streaming only, so. But I feel like if it is a show that's modern now, it like looks all dark and dank and depressing, and I kind of miss it when shows just had a more pleasant like lighting that just felt more inviting and comforting. Like the perfect go home from a long day at work and you can relax and watch this like comforting show kind of vibe. Yeah, the Trump roast thing was like basically, I think it was like Seth MacFarlane was the host, the creator of Family Guy for some reason. And then yeah, um, and Trump was saying, "Oh, maybe I'll run for 2012 presidency," but of course, he didn't. That was Mitt Romney versus Obama. And I think the reason why he chose not to do that was because he knew, like, if he did, the chances of winning would be very low because, usually, like with most presidential terms, since like the, oh, gosh, what was his name? The president from the 80s, Ronald Reagan era, each president has like 2 consecutive terms, and he probably realized, Obama's probably going to win in a second term just like the previous other presidents. So I'm just going to lay back, let him get it, and then I'll come out with the potential of having the political pendulum sway in my favor in 2016. And so that's clearly what he did. He is a businessman. He understands how this stuff works. He pays attention to patterns and things like that, and sees when it's his time to strike. And he saw his time to strike, and that's when he took it. So yeah, does that make him like a good guy? Well, no, but it does make him a really strategic fellow that knows what he wants. He'll do what he can do to get it. So yeah. But anywho, the actual roasting itself was, mildly entertaining. I thought that Seth MacFarlane was pretty funny, but everyone else, especially the Jersey Shore guy called The Situation, I think, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was so unfunny, it was so cringy. But then you had other, like, people who were supposed to be comedians. Some of them got mild chuckles out of me. A lot of them, I was just quiet the whole time, didn't react at all. I do respect, like, the bravery it takes to go out on stage and say jokes in front of an audience. That takes a lot of courage. So kudos to them for having the chutzpah to do stuff like that. But when it comes to the actual delivery, honestly, I feel like Seth MacFarlane was really the only one that generally kept me like entertained the whole time. Everyone else was kind of just like meh. And then after I was done watching that, I took my vitamins, I brushed my teeth. Then I was listening to a soft white underbelly video about the one of the victims of Epstein, talking about her experience. Lots of horrific stuff that I don't want to get into here. All I'm going to say is if you want to check it out, it's on the soft white underbelly YouTube channel. He's starting to interview a lot of the victims, and one of them was like the one I listened to was like a week ago, and yeah, just terrific details. Truly awful people in the world. Very sad. And yeah, after I listened to that, I was like, oh. I started to fold my clothes, and as I was doing, I was like, wait a minute, I could knock 2 birds out with 1 stone. I'm going to record myself folding clothes while talking about it, so I can distract myself by how long and arduous the process of folding clothes is by talking about my day. So now we're here. So that's pretty much the update for today. Overall, yeah, not too bad. Had some interesting conversations with my coworkers. Yeah, had a positive outlook on my situation and was just happy to be working, have a job, and help people. Yeah. Found an old friend at work that I said hello to and just, greeted for a little while before going back to my duties. That was nice. I enjoyed that. But yeah, that's gonna do it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. Take care and have yourself a great rest of your day, night, morning, whatever time you're watching this. Goodbye, and see you next time.